It is an absolute meltdown unfolding in Montecito right now, and Prince Harry appears to be reaching his breaking point as everything he and Meghan Markle built in California crumbles around them like a house of cards in a hurricane. The whispers coming out of their $16 million mansion are growing louder by the day, and what sources are revealing paints a picture of a man who is desperate, isolated, and increasingly questioning every decision that brought him to this moment. Harry, the prince who once stood before the world and declared he was stepping back from royal duties to protect his family, is now allegedly begging for a pathway back to the United Kingdom. And folks, the irony of this situation is so thick you could cut it with a knife. For years, we watched Harry burn every bridge connecting him to his former life. We watched him sit down with Oprah and level devastating accusations against his own family. We watched him publish a memoir that exposed intimate family secrets and painted his relatives in the most unflattering light imaginable. We watched him allow Netflix cameras into his life to produce a documentary that many considered the final nail in the coffin of his royal relationships. And now, according to multiple insiders, the man who seemed so certain he was escaping a toxic prison is desperately searching for an escape hatch from the life he chose. Sources close to the situation are not holding back. One insider described Harry's current state as absolutely miserable, saying he wakes up every day wondering how everything went so wrong so fast. Another source put it even more bluntly, claiming the prince is like a caged animal in that Montecito mansion, pacing the floors and obsessing over what might have been. Let that sink in for a moment. The man who told the world he was finally free, finally able to breathe, finally living his authentic life, is now reportedly suffocating under the weight of his California dream turned nightmare. The reports suggest Harry has been making quiet overtures, attempting to repair relationships he spent years destroying. Word on the street is that he has been reaching out to old friends, former palace aides, anyone who might still have a sympathetic ear and a connection to his former world. But here is the devastating reality he is facing. When you spend years publicly trashing your family, your country, and the institution that gave you everything, people tend to remember. They remember every interview, every accusation, every salacious detail splashed across headlines around the globe. But Harry's alleged homesickness is just one piece of this catastrophic puzzle, and what is happening to Meghan's carefully constructed California empire is sending shockwaves through Hollywood in ways nobody predicted. The California dream that Meghan Markle sold to the world, and more importantly sold to her husband, is disintegrating before our very eyes. This was supposed to be her moment of triumph, her chance to prove that she could build something bigger and better than anything the stuffy British monarchy could offer. Instead, sources are painting a picture of professional disaster, social isolation, and an empire built on nothing but smoke and mirrors, finally being exposed for what it truly was. Let us start with the business ventures, because this is where the collapse becomes undeniable. Archwell Productions, the Netflix production company that was supposed to establish the Sussexes as major players in Hollywood, has been nothing short of a catastrophe. Their deal, reportedly worth around $100 million, was signed with enormous fanfare back in 2020. Industry insiders expected a flood of content, a revolutionary new voice in entertainment, the kind of star power that would make Netflix executives pop champagne every night. What they got instead was a handful of projects that failed to capture public imagination and ratings that can only be described as embarrassing. One entertainment industry source did not mince words when describing the situation. They said the Sussexes came in expecting to be treated like the biggest stars in Hollywood, but they had no experience, no track record, and frankly no understanding of how hard this industry actually is. Another insider was even more cutting, claiming that every meeting with the couple was an exercise in managing enormous egos attached to minimal output, and they are absolutely right. The entertainment industry is littered with the wreckage of celebrities who thought fame alone would translate into production success. Harry and Meghan are simply the latest cautionary tale. The Spotify disaster only compounds this narrative of professional failure. Their deal with the streaming giant, worth a reported $25 million, ended not with a celebration but with a whimper and mutual separation. Meghan's podcast Archetypes launched with much fanfare, featured high-profile guests, and then simply fizzled. The shows were described by critics as meandering, self-indulgent, and lacking the substance to justify the astronomical price tag attached to the deal. When Spotify executive Bill Simmons publicly called them grifters, it sent shockwaves through the industry. Here was an insider, someone who had worked with countless celebrities, using that word, grifters. Let that word hang in the air for a moment. Sources familiar with Meghan's state of mind say she is struggling to understand why Hollywood has not embraced her the way she expected. One insider claimed she genuinely believed she would be running a major production company by now, that she would be on the A-list party circuit, that she would have transitioned seamlessly from royal to entertainment mogul. The reality has been crushingly different. Reports suggest the couple struggles to get meetings with top-tier talent, that their calls go unreturned, that the initial curiosity surrounding them has curdled into something approaching industry-wide skepticism. But the professional failures are only part of Meghan's California nightmare. and what is happening in their personal life behind those mansion walls is even more troubling. The social isolation surrounding Harry and Meghan in their Montecito enclave has become impossible to ignore, and the couple, who seemed to have celebrity friends coming out of their ears during those early days in America, are now reportedly struggling to maintain meaningful connections. This is a dramatic fall from grace for two people who position themselves as beloved members of Hollywood royalty, and the reasons behind their social exile are revealing in the most uncomfortable ways. Remember when they first arrived in California? The celebrity support seemed overwhelming. Oprah was conducting sympathetic interviews, Tyler Perry was offering his mansion as a safe haven, David Foster and Katharine McPhee were supposedly close friends. The couple was photographed with everyone from Serena Williams to James Corden. It appeared they had seamlessly transitioned from British royalty to American celebrity elite, but sources now say that initial warmth has cooled to something approaching Arctic temperatures. One insider close to Montecito social circles put it this way: people were curious at first, maybe even a little starstruck by having actual royalty in the neighborhood. But then they got to know them and the invitations stopped coming. Another source claimed the couple has a reputation for being difficult, for turning every social gathering into an opportunity to discuss their grievances, for making everything about themselves in ways that exhaust even the most patient hosts. Allow me to translate that from polite society speak. Nobody wants to hang out with people who never stop complaining about how unfairly they have been treated while living in a $16 million mansion. The friendship situation has become so dire that reports suggest the couple struggles to find other families for their children to socialize with. Think about that for a moment. Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, two children with one of the most famous last names on the planet, are allegedly growing up in social isolation because their parents have alienated virtually everyone around them. Sources claim Harry is particularly devastated by this reality, that he never imagined his children would grow up without the community, the extended family, the sense of belonging that he experienced despite his complicated childhood. Those close to the situation say Harry frequently laments what his children are missing. One source claimed he talks about Balmoral, about Christmas at Sandringham, about the traditions and the cousins and the sense of history that his own children will never experience. The prince, who walked away from all of that, reportedly lies awake at night wondering if he made a terrible mistake. And folks, there is something genuinely heartbreaking about that image, even for those of us who have watched his choices with mounting disbelief over the years. The couple's relationship with their neighbors has also reportedly soured. Word on the street is that Harry and Meghan believed moving to Montecito would give them privacy while still providing access to an exclusive social scene. What they discovered instead is that their Montecito neighbors include people like Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres, people who guard their privacy fiercely and have little patience for the constant drama that seems to follow the Sussexes everywhere they go. But the social isolation is nothing compared to what insiders are revealing about the state of Harry and Meghan's marriage itself, and the cracks forming in their relationship are becoming impossible to ignore. The marriage that launched 1,000 tabloid headlines, that inspired a globally televised wedding watched by hundreds of millions, that supposedly represented a fairy tale love story for the modern age, is now reportedly under severe strain. Sources close to the couple are painting a picture of two people who have found themselves at a crossroads, with Harry allegedly questioning everything about the path Meghan has led him down, and Meghan increasingly frustrated with a husband who cannot seem to commit fully to their American life. Let us be brutally honest here. This marriage was always going to face extraordinary pressures. When you combine a prince raised in the most scrutinized family on earth with an American actress accustomed to controlling her own narrative, friction was inevitable. But insiders say the current tension goes far beyond normal marital disagreements. One source described their dynamic as toxic in ways that are difficult to witness, claiming that arguments have become more frequent, more intense, and more focused on fundamental questions about their future. The core issue, according to those familiar with the situation, is that Harry and Meghan want fundamentally different things. Harry, despite everything he has said publicly, allegedly remains deeply connected to Britain emotionally and psychologically. He misses his homeland, his old friends, his family despite the estrangement, and most painfully, he misses having a clear purpose. Being a senior working royal gave his life structure and meaning. Being a podcaster and producer in California apparently does not provide the same satisfaction. Meghan, on the other hand, has reportedly made clear that she has absolutely no intention of ever returning to the United Kingdom for anything more than brief visits. Sources claim she views Britain as hostile territory, a place where she was mistreated by both the media and the royal family, and she has no desire to subject herself or her children to that environment ever again. One insider said Meghan has told Harry in no uncertain terms that if he wants to go back, he can go alone. And that ultimatum, if true, represents an almost impossible choice for the prince. Those close to Harry say he feels trapped between two worlds, fully belonging to neither. One source described it as watching someone slowly realize they gave up everything for something that is not making them happy. Another insider claimed Harry has confided to friends that he sometimes does not recognize his own life anymore, that he feels like a passenger rather than a driver in his own story. Let that sink in for a moment. This is a grown man, a prince who served in the military, who walked behind his mother's coffin as a 12-year-old boy with the entire world watching, now reportedly feeling powerless in his own marriage. The couple's public appearances have done little to quell speculation about marital trouble. Body language experts have had a field day analyzing their interactions, noting what they describe as increasing physical distance, forced smiles, and a tension that seems to simmer just beneath the surface. Whether these observations are accurate or simply the projections of observers who want to see cracks, the narrative of a troubled marriage has taken hold in ways that must be deeply frustrating for both of them. But the marital strain is just one symptom of a larger problem, and what is happening with Harry's attempts to return to the United Kingdom is revealing just how badly he has damaged his standing with the royal family. The palace walls have gone up around Prince Harry in ways he apparently never anticipated, and his alleged attempts to engineer some kind of return to royal life are meeting resistance so absolute that sources say he is genuinely shocked by the reception. This is a man who seemed to believe that eventually, after enough time passed, the family would welcome him back with open arms. What he is discovering instead is that some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. According to those familiar with the situation, Harry has made multiple approaches toward reconciliation with his father, King Charles, and his brother, Prince William. These attempts have reportedly ranged from direct communication to messages passed through intermediaries, from requests for private meetings to suggestions about possible future royal roles. The response from the palace has been consistent and devastating. Silence, polite deflection, and a clear message that Harry's return is not being seriously considered by anyone in a position of power. One palace insider put it this way: "There is sympathy for Harry as a human being who seems to be struggling, but there is absolutely zero appetite for inviting that chaos back into the institution." Another source was even more direct, claiming that William in particular has made clear he will not facilitate any kind of comeback for his brother, that the trust has been too thoroughly destroyed, that too many secrets have been exposed, and they are right. When you write a memoir detailing private family conversations and accusing your relatives of racism, coldness, and cruelty, you cannot reasonably expect those same people to roll out the red carpet when you decide you want back in. The irony here is staggering. Harry spent years complaining about being trapped in the royal system, about being controlled and silenced and prevented from living authentically. He told the world he was escaping a gilded cage. Now, according to insiders, he would give almost anything to be welcomed back into that cage, only to find the door firmly locked. Let that sink in for a moment. The man who made millions telling the world how terrible his family was, now allegedly wants nothing more than to be part of that family again. Sources say Harry is particularly devastated by the distance between himself and his brother William. These are two men who grew up sharing the impossible burden of being Diana's sons, who walked side by side behind her coffin, who once seemed inseparable in their shared mission to honor their mother's legacy. Now reports suggest they barely speak, that William has essentially written Harry off as someone who chose his wife over his family and must live with the consequences of that choice. The situation with King Charles is reportedly slightly more complicated. Insiders suggest Charles does want some kind of relationship with his younger son, that he misses Harry and wishes things had gone differently. But even the king apparently recognizes that any significant reconciliation would create enormous problems with William, with palace staff, and with the British public who have watched Harry trash their monarchy for years. But Harry's blocked path home is only part of this unfolding tragedy, and the financial pressures now bearing down on the couple are threatening to make everything exponentially worse. The money situation for Harry and Meghan is becoming a genuine crisis, and the couple, who seemed to have unlimited wealth at their fingertips when they first arrived in America, are now reportedly facing financial pressures they never anticipated. This is what happens when your primary business model depends on trading off a family name while simultaneously destroying your relationship with that family. Eventually, the well runs dry, and sources say the Sussexes are beginning to feel the drought. Let us examine the numbers because they tell a devastating story. Their Montecito mansion reportedly costs around $300,000 annually just in security, and that does not include the mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance, and staff required to run a $16 million estate. Their Archwell Foundation requires ongoing funding to maintain its charitable status, but donations have reportedly slowed dramatically as public interest in the couple has waned. Their Netflix deal, while initially lucrative, does not continue forever, and industry sources suggest renewal negotiations will be significantly less favorable given the couple's underwhelming output. One financial analyst who has studied celebrity economics put it bluntly: "They are spending at a royal level without royal income or royal institutional support. That is not sustainable indefinitely." Another source familiar with their situation claimed the couple has been exploring various money-making ventures with increasing desperation, from potential book deals to speaking engagements to endorsement opportunities. The problem is that their brand has become toxic to many potential partners who fear association with their controversies. The Spotify experience looms large over these financial concerns. When one of the largest media companies in the world essentially fires you and allows an executive to publicly call you grifters, it sends a message to every other potential business partner. Sources claim meetings that would have been automatic 2 years ago now require extensive convincing, that executives are wary of the Sussexes' reputation for being difficult to work with and light on deliverables. Allow me to translate. Hollywood has learned that Harry and Meghan are better at generating headlines than generating content. Harry reportedly expected his inheritance from the late Queen Elizabeth and from his mother Diana's estate to provide a comfortable cushion. And while those inheritances were substantial, they were not inexhaustible, particularly when you factor in the kind of lifestyle the couple has chosen to maintain. Sources say Harry has been shocked by how quickly money disappears when you are paying California prices for everything from real estate to security to staff. The security issue is particularly complicated because it intersects with Harry's ongoing legal battles against the British government over his protection when visiting the United Kingdom. He has reportedly spent millions on lawyers fighting for taxpayer-funded security, money that might have been better spent actually providing for his family's security directly. One insider described the legal strategy as throwing good money after bad in pursuit of a symbolic victory that will never come. And folks, there is something almost tragicomic about a man worth tens of millions arguing that the public should pay to protect him while he visits the country he has spent years publicly criticizing. But the financial pressures are creating ripple effects throughout their operation, and what is happening with their staff and business ventures reveals an organization in complete freefall. The exodus of staff from Harry and Meghan's orbit has reached levels that can only be described as catastrophic, and the pattern of departures is telling a story that no amount of public relations spin can effectively counter. When one person leaves an organization, it could be anything. When 2 or 3 leave, it might be coincidence. But when virtually your entire team walks out the door within a matter of months, you have to start asking what exactly is going on behind closed doors. The numbers here are genuinely staggering. Josh Kettler, their chief of staff, lasted only 3 months before reportedly fleeing the position. Christine Weil-Schirmer, their communications secretary, departed after what sources describe as a deeply frustrating experience. Multiple personal assistants have cycled through the household with alarming speed, and the departures extend beyond staff to include professional advisors, consultants, and business partners who have quietly distanced themselves from the Sussex brand. One former employee, speaking on condition of anonymity, described the working environment as unlike anything they had experienced in decades of professional life. They claimed the expectations were unrealistic, the management style was chaotic, and the constant crisis mode was exhausting beyond description. Another source who worked closely with the couple said they genuinely believe they are the victims in every situation, which makes it impossible to have productive conversations about what might actually be going wrong. Let that sink in for a moment. The people who worked most closely with Harry and Meghan are painting a picture of a household in perpetual chaos. The staff turnover rate is particularly damaging because it undermines the couple's ability to execute on any of their business ventures. Every time a key employee leaves, institutional knowledge walks out the door. Relationships with partners and contacts have to be rebuilt. Projects are delayed or abandoned entirely. Sources say the constant turnover has made it nearly impossible to maintain momentum on anything, that the couple announces ventures with great fanfare only to watch them wither from lack of consistent execution. Industry observers have noted that the Sussex operation now resembles less a professional organization than a revolving door of hopeful employees who quickly discover reality does not match the job description. One recruiter who specializes in placing executives with high-profile clients said they now warn candidates about what they are getting into, that taking a job with the Sussexes has become seen as a career risk rather than a career opportunity. And folks, when headhunters are actively steering talent away from your organization, you have a problem that no amount of restructuring will solve. The couple has attempted to frame these departures as strategic restructuring, as a deliberate move toward a leaner operation, but sources close to the situation say this narrative is desperately attempting to spin disaster as intentional decision-making. One insider laughed when asked about the restructuring claim, saying it is like watching someone burn down their house and then claim they wanted to go camping anyway. But the staff exodus is symptomatic of larger problems, and what insiders are revealing about Meghan's approach to business and relationships is illuminating why everything seems to be falling apart at once. The pattern emerging around Meghan Markle is one that sources say has repeated itself throughout her life, and understanding this pattern is essential to understanding why her California kingdom is crumbling. Those who have worked with her, known her socially, or observed her closely over the years describe a consistent cycle: initial charm and connection, followed by escalating demands and perceived slights, culminating in dramatic ruptures and burned bridges that are never rebuilt. Let us examine the evidence, because it is striking in its consistency. Meghan's relationship with her father, Thomas Markle, collapsed in spectacular public fashion, with accusations flying in both directions and no reconciliation in sight. Her relationship with her half-siblings has been similarly destroyed, with both sides trading barbs through media outlets for years. Multiple former friends, including some who were bridesmaids at her first wedding, have reportedly distanced themselves entirely, and now her professional relationships are following the same trajectory. One source who has known Meghan since her early acting days in Toronto put it this way: "She is incredibly charming when you first meet her, The kind of person who makes you feel like you are the most important person in the room. But eventually you realize the charm is transactional, and when you stop being useful, you stop existing. Another former associate claimed Meghan views relationships through a lens of what people can do for her, and when that utility expires, so does her interest in maintaining the connection. The accusations of difficult behavior extend to her time as a working royal, where reports emerged of staff members reduced to tears, of clashes with palace personnel, of a duchess who struggled to accept that she was joining an institution rather than taking it over. The palace conducted an investigation into bullying allegations, the results of which have never been made public. Whatever those results showed, multiple staff members left their positions during and after working with Meghan, a pattern that has clearly continued in California. Sources close to Harry say he initially dismissed these concerns, believing that Meghan was simply being judged unfairly by racist media and jealous courtiers. But insiders now claim he is beginning to question whether the pattern of conflict that follows his wife might not always be someone else's fault. One source said Harry has started noticing that the common denominator in all these failed relationships is the same person, and he is struggling to reconcile that observation with his loyalty to his wife. This is perhaps the most difficult aspect of Harry's situation to observe. He clearly loves Meghan and has sacrificed enormously to be with her. But sources suggest he is increasingly trapped between acknowledging uncomfortable patterns and maintaining the narrative that his wife is a perpetual victim of unfair treatment. Allow me to translate. He is either lying to everyone else or lying to himself, and neither option ends well. But Meghan's relationship patterns are creating ripple effects beyond just staff and friends, and what is happening with their public image reveals just how thoroughly the Sussex brand has collapsed. The Sussex brand has become something approaching toxic in the court of public opinion, and the polling numbers tell a story of catastrophic decline that must keep Harry and Meghan awake at night. When they first arrived in America, there was genuine curiosity and even sympathy for the couple who had seemingly escaped a stifling institution. Now, years later, public sentiment has shifted so dramatically that sources say even their most ardent supporters are struggling to maintain enthusiasm. The numbers are brutal and undeniable. Polling in the United Kingdom consistently shows Harry and Meghan at the bottom of royal popularity rankings, often even below Prince Andrew, a man who has been credibly accused of deeply disturbing behavior. Let that comparison sink in for a moment. The British public, by significant margins, views Harry more negatively than a royal who had to step back from duties over connections to a convicted criminal. That is not just bad polling. That is a complete collapse of goodwill. American opinion, while initially more favorable, has also shifted significantly. Surveys show declining interest in the couple, with many respondents describing them as complainers, hypocrites, and attention seekers. One pollster who has tracked celebrity favorability for decades said the trajectory is remarkable, noting that most celebrities experience gradual shifts in public perception, but the Sussexes have managed to crater their image with unusual speed and thoroughness. The media narrative has shifted accordingly. Where once mainstream outlets approach Sussex stories with at least the pretense of neutrality, there is now open skepticism and even mockery in coverage. Headlines that once proclaimed Harry and Meghan's fresh start now question their judgment, their sincerity, and their prospects. Commentators who initially offered sympathetic analysis have become increasingly critical. The Sussex story has shifted from inspiring escape narrative to cautionary tale about the dangers of believing your own press. Sources say Harry is particularly wounded by his standing in Britain, that despite everything he has said about wanting to escape royal life, he desperately craves approval from the British public. One insider claimed he obsesses over coverage, reading comments and polling data and media analysis, despite advice from everyone around him to step away from the noise. The prince, who said he wanted privacy, reportedly cannot stop monitoring what people think of him and what they think is devastating. The couple's attempts at image rehabilitation have largely failed. Meghan's new lifestyle brand has been met with skepticism rather than excitement. Harry's various public appearances have generated more mockery than sympathy. Their documentary and book deals, meant to tell their side of the story, have instead provided endless fodder for critics who parse every claim for inconsistencies and contradictions. One public relations expert said they have created a situation where nothing they do will be received charitably, and that kind of entrenched negativity is nearly impossible to overcome. But the brand collapse has real-world consequences, and what is happening to their future prospects is forcing both Harry and Meghan to confront some uncomfortable realities about what comes next. The future that Harry and Meghan once envisioned, a future of Hollywood success, philanthropic impact, and global admiration, is evaporating like morning fog in the California sunshine. Sources close to the couple say they are being forced to confront the possibility that their best days might already be behind them, that the trajectory is downward rather than upward, and that the second act they imagine may never materialize. The entertainment industry has essentially closed ranks against them. Reports suggest major studios are reluctant to partner with the Sussexes, viewing them as more trouble than they are worth. Production companies that might have clamored for meetings 3 years ago are now conveniently unavailable. Talent agencies are reportedly lukewarm about representation. The couple's name, which was once their greatest asset, has become their heaviest liability. One industry insider did not mince words. Hollywood is built on relationships, and the Sussexes have burned through relationships faster than anyone I have ever seen. Another source in the entertainment business said there is a reason their Netflix output has been so limited, suggesting that the streaming giant has essentially warehoused the couple's deal rather than actively developing their content. Word on the street is that renewal is far from certain, and even if some kind of deal continues, the terms will be dramatically less favorable. The speaking circuit, once a reliable revenue stream for high-profile figures, has also cooled considerably. Harry and Meghan reportedly commanded enormous fees for appearances in the immediate aftermath of their royal departure, with audiences eager to hear from the couple who had shaken up the monarchy. But sources say demand has decreased significantly, with event planners citing audience fatigue and concerns about controversy. One events industry professional said booking the Sussexes has become a risk that many clients are no longer willing to take. Even their charitable work, supposedly the foundation of their post-royal life, has struggled to gain traction. Archwell, their foundation, has faced questions about its output relative to its overhead, about where donations actually go, about whether the organization exists primarily to employ Sussexes rather than accomplish charitable goals. These criticisms may be unfair, but they have taken hold in ways that undermine the couple's attempts to position themselves as serious philanthropists. Sources say both Harry and Meghan are beginning to grasp the scope of their predicament. One insider claimed there are moments of genuine despair, particularly from Harry, who traded everything for a life that is not delivering what he expected. Another source said the realization that they may have peaked is slowly dawning, and neither of them is handling it well. Let that sink in for a moment. These are two people in their 40s, with decades of life ahead of them, potentially facing a future of diminishing returns and fading relevance. But the question of what comes next remains unanswered, and what sources are revealing about the options before Harry and Meghan is illuminating just how limited their choices have become. The options available to Harry and Meghan have narrowed dramatically, and sources say the couple is facing a crossroads that will define the rest of their lives. Continue down their current path and watch their relevance and resources slowly drain away. Attempt some kind of reconciliation with the royal family and face the humiliation of admitting failure, or chart some third course that nobody has yet identified but that might somehow salvage their situation. The reconciliation option, according to those familiar with palace thinking, remains essentially closed. King Charles might theoretically be open to warming relations with his younger son, but any meaningful return to royal duties would face insurmountable obstacles. Prince William has reportedly made his position crystal clear. The senior royal staff have no interest in reopening old wounds, and the British public would almost certainly react with fury to any suggestion that Harry and Meghan should be welcomed back after years of public attacks on the institution. One palace source put it bluntly: even if Harry came back tomorrow, got on his knees and apologized for everything, what role would he possibly fill? His position has been given away, his credibility is destroyed, his presence would create chaos everywhere he went. The answer to what would happen is nothing, because there is no pathway that works. Another insider said the only scenario in which Harry returns to anything resembling royal life is if something catastrophic happens to the direct line of succession, and even then, it would be controversial beyond description. The continue-as-is option is equally unappealing. Sources say the couple's current trajectory leads toward diminishing public interest, declining business opportunities, and increasing financial pressure. They can maintain their Montecito lifestyle for years on existing resources, but the influence and relevance they crave will continue to slip away. The Hollywood power couple image they cultivated was always more aspiration than reality, and reality is now asserting itself with brutal clarity. Some observers have suggested the couple might benefit from stepping back entirely, disappearing from public life, raising their children in peace, and allowing the fever around them to break. But sources say neither Harry nor Meghan seems capable of accepting a quiet life. One insider claimed they are addicted to attention, both positive and negative, and the prospect of genuine obscurity terrifies them more than continued controversy. Another source said Meghan in particular has spent her entire life climbing toward the spotlight and cannot imagine willingly stepping away from it. The children Archie and Lilibet add another dimension of complexity. Whatever Harry and Meghan decide about their own futures affects two young people who did not choose any of this. Sources say Harry in particular is tormented by questions about what kind of life he is providing for his children, whether they would be better off in Britain with access to family and heritage, whether his choices have already shaped their futures in ways that cannot be undone. But as we examine where Harry and Meghan go from here, it is impossible to ignore that they are both victims and authors of their own circumstances, and the lessons of their spectacular rise and devastating fall are worth considering. The story of Harry and Meghan will ultimately be written by history, but the chapter we are witnessing right now is one of dreams deferred, relationships destroyed, and consequences finally coming due. This is what happens when you build a brand on grievance rather than achievement, when you mistake attention for respect, when you burn bridges believing you will never need to cross them again. The California dream that seemed so bright when they first arrived has dimmed to something approaching darkness, and both Harry and Meghan are facing the reality that they are trapped in a prison of their own construction. Harry's desperation to return to Britain, if the reports are accurate, represents a profound admission of failure. This is a man who stood before the world and declared he was choosing freedom, choosing love, choosing himself over duty and tradition. He allowed a documentary crew to film his grievances. He published a memoir exposing his deepest family secrets. He participated in an interview that aired accusations of racism against his own relatives. And now, allegedly, he would give anything to undo what cannot be undone. The tragedy is that even if his family wanted to forgive him, the public nature of his betrayals makes reconciliation nearly impossible. Meghan's situation is equally complicated. She achieved something extraordinary by marrying into the most famous family on earth, and then she gambled that extraordinary position on the belief that she could build something even bigger in America. That gamble appears to be losing. Her production company has underwhelmed, her podcast was canceled, her friendships have evaporated, her staff have fled, and the image she so carefully cultivated of a woman rising above racism and adversity has been undermined by the pattern of conflict that seems to follow her everywhere. Sources close to the couple paint a picture of two people who cannot agree on a path forward, whose visions for the future have diverged in ways that may be irreconcilable, whose marriage is straining under pressures that would challenge any relationship. One insider said they are watching a slow-motion collapse that everyone can see, except apparently the two people at the center of it. Another source claimed the next 12 to 18 months will determine whether this marriage survives, whether their businesses survive, whether their public personas survive. Folks, there is something genuinely sad about watching this unfold, even for those of us who have watched their choices with mounting disbelief. Harry was a prince who genuinely seemed to want to do good in the world, who carried his mother's legacy with obvious devotion, who charmed people everywhere he went. Meghan was an actress who broke barriers, who brought energy and modernity to a state institution, who seemed to represent a new kind of royal. Together, they could have been remarkable. Instead, they have become a cautionary tale about what happens when you believe the world owes you something and discover that it absolutely does not. The walls are closing in on that Montecito mansion, and neither Harry's alleged begging for a UK return nor Meghan's attempts to salvage her California empire seem likely to succeed. What happens next remains uncertain, but the trajectory points toward more conflict, more isolation, and more painful reckonings with choices that cannot be taken back. Drop your thoughts below. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next video is waiting, and you will not believe what is coming next.